So the video's doing quite well. It's got over 300 views at this point, and I'm having to now argue with people in the comments, which I hate doing, and because it always you had to encounter such unbelievably sloppy thinking very often, and people who really aren't very well informed and don't haven't read much economics, and are kind of doing this demi-educated guesswork, and it's these kinds of opinions that go around. Like one person was saying that if everyone earns the same amount of money, the GDP will collapse and stuff like this. And then I had to point to studies on UBI saying that because, if people are given basic income, the research is pretty conclusive and it's strongly established in evidence that people do not stop working. I mean, and if you just think about this from like a logical perspective, like what would you do if you were given 47 grand a year, say, to live on, and everyone else was given the same as basic income? And like, what would you really like lie in bed all day? Would you really just sit on the couch eating crisps and watching telly? Like that would get boring pretty quickly, wouldn't it? I mean, I don't think we organize our lives in terms of like just enjoying ourselves and just wanting leisure time. Leisure time is very important. And I think with a society where there was UBI, more people would have more free time. And we'd realize that we really don't need to work as hard as we do work very often. And people would be able to devote their time to more things like creative pursuits, projects, starting their own businesses even. They have a little bit of financial support to do that if they want to, I don't know, start a bar or something like this, or, make tea cozies or whatever it is. And that inspires a passion in them. And then if people start buying their tea cozies, then that's goods and services contributed to the economy, so that's an element that feeds into GDP. And this is a scaremongering tactic by right wingers who are probably well off and afraid of losing their money. And I think like that's probably lots of the reason why people have disliked this video is because they they're afraid of losing their cash. They're afraid of being taxed. They're afraid of wealth redistribution. Um, you got these pervasive sort of delusions really that go around in wealthy people who are right wingers. So I work hard for my money. I worked hard and I became successful, and so on and so forth. And like, yeah, you work hard. Lots of people work hard. People working in factories work hard. There's some poor fuck in an Amazon warehouse somewhere, who's a migrant worker working 16-hour days or something, who lives in a tent just outside the Amazon warehouse and barely earns enough money to feed themselves, let alone house themselves, hence the tent. They're busting their ass for fuck all. And like a lot of people like are very, very fortunate, and they've grown up in fortunate circumstances. They've gone to the best schools, they've gotten into the best universities, they've gotten the top job, but they got a leg up at every single step of the way. And I want to see all that shit redressed. I don't think we're placing inherent value on people who have money, which is wrong. It lacks humanitarianism. It lacks a conscience. It is it is a mark of the fawning attitude that worships unfettered greed, and it needs to be put to a stop. And the way to do it is through universal basic income and wealth redistribution. And like for instance, like people work out of a sense of responsibility. I think when they're good workers, when they're realizing that they're doing something important. And so for instance, like nurses, for example, no one becomes a nurse or a teacher because they're after money. It's not a high paying job. It's a fucking necessary job that someone's got to do. Like, I mean, I'm a farmer, for example. I've worked on farms for years and I love the job, but I don't exactly do it for money. I do it for the sense of fulfillment that comes with feeding people. And, like loads of people in farming are like that. They're not really there because they're expecting to earn lots of money. Farming isn't that well paid, really. And, like, for instance, if, lots of them like driving tractors and like they've got a passion for that. And they love machinery and that's why they do it. Or you love livestock animals and love working with animals like I do. And that's why you do the job. You don't do it because, like, for instance, it doesn't give you really enough free time to enjoy spending the money for that matter. And I think if everyone got the same wage, like most farm workers would be doing better than they are on 47 grand a year. I was getting paid like £25,000 a year when I was working on farms, which I mean for me at the time was like a nice lot of money and like a really good income. I was enjoying my life more, but I wasn't living in a very lavish lifestyle. I was able to save a bit of money as well, which was brilliant. But I mean, people need a lot more support in society, I think, than we're given. And I don't think people are going to stop working with wealth redistribution and UBI. And I think people will have more time to uh, work work on things that they're passionate about. And I think that there's in the jobs market anyway, there's a lot of this scrambling after jobs that goes on, and a lot of people willing to take jobs that don't really inspire any kind of passion in them, but that might be quite well paid, and they'll put themselves through corporate hell, for a pay packet at the end of the month. And I think if we actually took away that money incentive by paying everyone the same, I think more people would be more discerning about the sorts of work that they do. I think that they would really start to consider more how much their work is really contributing to the world. And because like lots of people out there, their work is not necessary, doesn't contribute much to reality and life, and it is a kind of a nothingy bullshitty job. I mean, I'm like talking about people like a lot in the tech sector, a lot of those sorts of jobs like programming and shit, and like, well, I mean, create software, I suppose, but like a lot of them I hear use AI software and things like this to write their code for them, and they end up doing sort of 2 hours work a day, but get paid like 80K a year. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, there's people out there working in the fields to feed you, and you get away with this laziness that goes on for high salaries. And I think a lot of rich people out there, particularly the sort of the trust fund baby crowd who have been inordinately wealthy from birth and will be wealthy for their entire lives, and these people living off the interest from their savings accounts, and who we need to get rid of all of that. We can't keep having that. That is, it's just abhorrent. It's abhorrent while poverty exists. Like, I've been poor. I've been very poor in my time. I've been homeless 4 times in my life, and it is not enjoyable. I've literally struggled to find food at times. I've had, you know, weeks go by with no money at all, and just constantly grinding through poverty. And it causes people to kill themselves and things like this. And you ending up on the streets is just like you've been completely disregarded by society, completely disenfranchised, completely made into a pariah almost. And well, in fact, and then there are people swanning around on trust funds. And I just think of the sorts of people disliking my video. I imagine it's a load of privately educated, rich boys, probably more than likely, who are terrified of losing the lifestyles they've become accustomed to. And I just think of, I lose the lifestyle I've become accustomed to. Oh, wow, 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 you rich little idiots. Like, you are greedy as fuck. Share the money around. Do the decent thing. It is not virtue signaling like one commenter suggested. It is actual virtue in practice. Like, it is not a virtue to be greedy. It is vice to be greedy. And like, it's not going to, God, selfishness, greed, lack of compassion, psychopathic, narcissistic behavior. It's a detriment to the planet. It's a detriment to the quality of human life, and it must be stopped. The Greens, I'm changing my mind from what this electoral calculus website said the other day on the Green Party. I think the Greens are going to win the next election. I think they'll get the most seats. I think their performances in local council elections and by-elections sort of indicate that this is very likely. I think that the electoral calculus website is probably propped up by Reform or something like this, and are trying to project an image that Reform are headed for almost certain victory. Then if you follow the politics of the likes of Reform to its logical conclusion, we end up with oligarchy. We end up with the wealth concentrated in the hands of a tiny minority. It's 130 people in Russia, all of whom are multimillionaires and billionaires. And Putin himself, who's one of the oligarchs, he's sitting on a pile of cash $600 billion high. And what do you end up with in Russia? Huge poverty, with the majority of the population grinding, crushing, horrible living conditions for most people. Awful social problems, terrible use of terrible drugs like crocodile, destroying Russian youth. And there's no way for these people to get successful, or they're conscripted into the army and made to go fight in Ukraine. It is dreadful, and the Reform Party would see us end up like that, with those levels of inequality, those levels of poverty. And it can't happen. We can't have that. We want to live in a decent, open, fair society. And I think it's really unfair the way that that some people are richer than others. I think I genuinely do. And I think I always have done. I don't think poverty is a natural thing at all. And if you look at tribal cultures, for example, I was just thinking this earlier. If you have a tribe of people, and there's no currency obviously in tribal cultures, but if you have someone taking more food than the rest of them, it's going to cause a problem, is it not? This is like the microcosm of the macrocosm. The macrocosm being large developed nation states like Britain, say, or the United States, or something like this. But the tribal model is still applied at scale to some extent, or is still applicable. And if one person in the tribe is taking more food than other people, eventually they get exiled from the tribe, and or killed even. If it's like an island tribal culture and there's nowhere to exile them to except into the sea. But this is how societies self-organize. We can't end up in the situation where we have an oligarchy and the wealth concentrated in the hands of a fraction of 1% of the population. We need wealth redistribution. We need it now, as soon as possible. And if everyone were paid the same in society, the majority of people would be better off. And that's the truth. Median income is £39,000. GDP per capita is £47,000. If we could raise GDP per capita. Sorry, if we could give everyone 47 grand a year, they'd be, what, 8 grand better off. Most people, the average. And we'd end poverty, more importantly, you know. But, Gary Stevenson wants this to happen, I think. I hope. I hope he supports the Greens. I hope he supports UBI. But he doesn't talk about UBI all that often. And it's sort of a shame, really. And I'm just wondering, why is he doing all this? Why is he putting all this effort into campaigning? Is it just to raise his own platform and sell books? Like, frankly, so many influencers do. I don't know even. And he's trying to diversify his income streams and be a writer in addition to being an investment banker or a trader, and in addition to being a YouTuber and getting lots of money that way. I don't know what it is. I I I hope he has integrity. I think he is virtuous enough to see the case for his own personal wealth redistribution. But then again, I could say the same of pretty much anyone on the left in politics or in society, in the establishment. You know what I mean? The millionaires out there, in celebrity culture, who, most comedians, for instance, are left wing, and loads of them are really rich. When are they going to give back their money to the rest of society? A few people do. Like I've said, I gave the example of Keanu Reeves and Cillian Murphy. A few people really are that good and virtuous and great, and are decent philanthropic people, and aren't acting like Smaug the dragon, sitting on his pile of gold, but do give it back, and that's highly commendable. More people should be like that. Because I think you're ultimately doing yourself a disservice if you're not like that. And I think it's a mark of greed, basically. And the right wing love to say that this sort of politics is the politics of envy. And I'd say I don't envy you in the slightest, rich people. I think that I don't like rich people, not really. I've met a lot of them in my time. I've grown up rich, farming rich, sort of. Went to private school, met lots of rich people. I don't particularly like them. I don't think money makes good people. I don't think it makes people into good people, and and people with character and integrity. I really think it's highly detrimental to that. And I've met a lot of weak, insipid, vapid, vain, callous, trust fund baby types in my time, and they're not decent people, and they could not cope in most forms of difficult labor and employ or any form of employment, really, at a lower level, and it can't cope with that sort of thing, and live cosseted, comfortable, the lives of luxury, and don't contribute anything of real value. Loads of people are like that, and they need to be given the same amount of money as everyone else. Which, I mean, 47,000 a year. Say that's what it is. Very generous, you know. You can live a nice, decent, comfortable life on that, and that, I think, is what's possible for everyone, and that's what we should, I think, ultimately try and sponsor, encourage, and develop as a means of being socially compelled to do something. It should be like good manners to give your money away, like that. Like, it should be like etiquette. It should be considered wrong to have too much money. And I think that we already sort of have this attitude, and it's really obvious if you think about it. Like, take it back to the days when gold and silver was the currency, for example. If you had all the gold, it means other people can't have it. Exactly the same is true with contemporary money. Even though we have fiat currency and can print as much of it as we want, well, as much within limits, we can print a huge amount of it, I suppose. But um, and but we can't do that without causing inflation, obviously. And we get my point. We can't have a crisis of hyperinflation either and make everyone a millionaire, because then it wouldn't work. You need to slightly deflate the currency, if anything, and make individual units of money worth more. But this is 20 minutes now. I'm going to have to round it off with something. So yes, these comments on my video are very interesting. I tried to reply to as many of them as possible. No really good points have been made. Lots of objections, which I'm disappointed by, because I think ultimately it would benefit most people, but it would benefit most people. It'd make most people richer, at the expense of the minority who would lose a huge amount of money and to be recirculated back in the system. The business case for it is sound. More consumers with money means businesses do better, generally speaking. The employment case is sound for it as well, since the economy is not going to collapse because everyone's going to stop working. That won't happen. I'd ideally like it if fewer people did work, and that essential work is carried out still, obviously, and more people have more free time away from the drudgery of, say, corporate employment, where they're just working in a job of nothing, producing nothing of any real value, and getting paid decent-ish for it, or quite well for it even. I don't know, but yeah, less of this stuff. And I might center the Omega project around this. If I started something called the Omega project a few years ago, just in case you didn't know. It's like an underground organization, a resistance movement, since the omega in physics is the symbol for resistance. So I thought that was quite clever. Yeah, resisting the politics of the rich. And like and you see that, like, billionaires, we can do this as well, because billionaires are running scared of the people. That they're still afraid of the people. They're not above us at all. This is why, you get anything and everything thrown at the Green Party by the right wing press. I can't go on for too much longer because this has gone on for too much time already. But yeah, they fight tooth and nail to keep their huge stacks of cash, and we can't let that happen. If we united against them and democratic about it, it won't happen, and they will give up their money, and we'll have a happy society, hopefully.